The massive circular chamber hummed with tension as 12 different alien species gathered around the central holographic display. The Galactic Council had seen many crises before, but this one felt different. 3 small dots moved steadily across the star map, heading toward a world that could spark the first major war in 50 years. Ambassador HFY stood at the center of the room, his blue-scaled skin glistening under the bright lights. The Viridian diplomat had called this emergency session, and now every eye in the chamber was fixed on him. His people had claimed the mining world of Kepler 442b 6 months ago, and everything had been going smoothly until the humans arrived. "Honored delegates," HFY began, his voice carrying the weight of barely controlled fear. "The situation has escalated beyond our initial projections. 3 human warships are now approaching Kepler 442b, and our intelligence suggests they have no intention of backing down." The holographic display zoomed in on the 3 ships. They looked small and unremarkable compared to the massive Viridian fleet waiting in orbit around the contested world. The lead ship, designated as the UES Defiant, was barely a quarter the size of a Viridian heavy cruiser. The other 2 vessels, Ranger and Vanguard, were even smaller. Senator Thralix of the Centauri Federation leaned forward in his chair. His insect-like features twitched with curiosity as he studied the human fleet. "These ships appear to be significantly outgunned. Surely the Viridians can handle 3 small vessels with their current force deployment." HFY's expression darkened. "That is precisely the problem, Senator. Our experience with humans suggests that numerical superiority means very little when dealing with their species. They have a disturbing tendency to find victory in situations where defeat should be mathematically certain." The chamber fell silent as the delegates absorbed this information. Most of them had heard rumors about human military encounters, but few had witnessed their tactics firsthand. The stories seemed too incredible to believe. Tales of impossible victories and strategies that defied all logic. Ambassador Veltar of the Andromedan Republic raised one of her 4 arms. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had studied human behavior extensively. "The psychological profiles we have developed on this species are deeply troubling. They appear to suffer from a collective form of what we might call strategic insanity. When faced with overwhelming odds, instead of retreating or surrendering as any rational species would do, they become more aggressive and unpredictable." Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Defiant, studying the tactical display with calm intensity. At 35 years old, he had commanded this ship for 3 years and had never lost the engagement. His crew trusted him completely, even when his orders seemed to make no sense at first glance. "Distance to target?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the screen. Lieutenant Commander Amy Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system from the escort ship Ranger. She had been Jake's friend since their academy days, and they had developed an almost telepathic understanding in combat situations. 2 hours at current speed, Jake. The Viridian fleet is holding position in a standard defensive formation around the planet." "Standard defensive formation," Jake repeated, a slight smile crossing his face. "That's their first mistake." On the bridge of the Vanguard, Captain Lisa Bennett was reviewing the intelligence reports they had received about Viridian military doctrine. At 42, she was the most experienced officer in the small human fleet, having served in conflicts across 3 sectors. Her reputation for unconventional tactics was legendary among human military circles. "Their fleet composition is impressive," she commented to her tactical officer. 12 heavy cruisers, each carrying enough firepower to level a small moon. Any other species would consider this an unwinnable scenario. Her tactical officer, a young lieutenant named Paul Davis, looked concerned. "Captain, the mathematical odds are significantly against us. Even with our superior maneuverability, we're facing a 4-to-1 disadvantage in terms of raw firepower." Bennett chuckled softly. "Paul, you're thinking like a Viridian. They see numbers and assume victory. We see a puzzle that needs solving." Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the debate continued. Representative Quindar of the Silicon Confederacy had accessed their database of human military encounters and was reading through the files with growing disbelief. "The Battle of Proxima Station," he announced to the chamber. "A single human destroyer against 6 pirate coalition heavy fighters. The human vessel was outnumbered and outgunned, operating with a damaged reactor and no backup support. Standard military doctrine would have called for immediate retreat." The chamber waited as Quindar continued reading. The human captain, one Rebecca Stone, accelerated directly toward the enemy formation instead of retreating. She used her ship's damaged reactor as a weapon, ejecting superheated plasma directly into the path of the pursuing fighters. 4 enemy vessels were destroyed, and the remaining 2 surrendered. Zexhai nodded grimly. "This is exactly what we fear. Humans do not follow conventional military logic. They turn their weaknesses into weapons, and their disadvantages into tactical opportunities." The Defiant science officer, Dr. Ben Carter, was running probability calculations on the ship's quantum computer. The results were fascinating from a purely academic standpoint and terrifying from a tactical one. Every conventional strategy showed the human fleet being destroyed within minutes of engagement. "Captain," he called out to Morrison, "I've run the simulations using standard tactical doctrine. We lose in every scenario where we engage the Viridian fleet directly." Jake turned to face the scientist. "Good thing we don't follow standard tactical doctrine then. What about non-standard approaches?" Dr. Carter's fingers flew across his console as he input new parameters. "If we abandon conventional engagement patterns and focus on exploiting the size differential between our vessels and theirs, the probability matrices become much more interesting." Commander Kate Phillips, the fleet's strategic coordinator, was studying the Viridian ship formations from her position on the Defiance bridge. She had spent weeks analyzing every available piece of intelligence about Viridian military culture and tactics. "They're predictable," she announced after several minutes of study. "Their entire military philosophy is based on overwhelming force and numerical superiority. They've never had to develop adaptive strategies because they've never faced an opponent willing to engage them at close range." The communication system chimed as a message arrived from Viridian Command. Admiral Kethfar's voice filled the bridge of all 3 human ships, translated by their universal communication systems. "Human vessels, this is Admiral Kethfar of the Viridian Defense Fleet. You are approaching a world under the protection of the Viridian Empire. Turn back immediately or face the consequences of your actions." Jake looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Each of them knew the odds they were facing, but none of them showed any sign of fear or doubt. This was what separated humans from every other species in the galaxy. When faced with impossible odds, they became more determined, not less. "Open a channel to all ships," Jake ordered. "Let's respond to the Admiral's invitation." The communication system activated, broadcasting Jake's response across all frequencies so that every ship in both fleets could hear. "Admiral Kethfar, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Ships. We're here to discuss the illegal occupation of a world designated for human colonization under Galactic Treaty 847C. We'd prefer to resolve this through diplomatic negotiation, but we're prepared for alternative solutions if necessary." In the Galactic Council chamber, the delegates listened to the human response with a mixture of admiration and horror. 3 ships against 12, and the humans were not only refusing to retreat, but were actually offering to negotiate from their position of apparent weakness. Ambassador Zexhai closed his eyes and whispered a prayer to his ancestors. "They're going to do it again. They're going to find a way to win an impossible battle, and we're going to have to revise everything we think we know about military strategy." The human fleet continued its steady approach toward Kepler 442b, where the Viridian Armada waited in perfect formation. In 2 hours, the galaxy would witness another demonstration of why humans had earned their reputation as the most unpredictable and dangerous species in known space. Admiral Kethfar stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Stellar Dominion, watching the 3 human ships approach with growing unease. The dreadnought stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull bristling with enough weapons to reduce a small moon to space dust. Around him, 11 other heavy cruisers maintained perfect formation, their combined firepower representing the might of the Viridian Empire. Yet something about those 3 tiny human vessels made his scales itch with worry. "Status report," he commanded. his voice echoing through the bridge's high ceiling. Commander Nethral, his second-in-command, consulted the tactical display. The human ships are maintaining steady approach vector. Estimated time to weapons range is 47 minutes. Their fleet configuration appears to be standard escort formation with the largest vessel taking point. Kethvar studied the approaching ships through the main view screen. They looked fragile compared to his massive warships, like insects approaching a pack of predators. But intelligence reports from across the galaxy told a different story. Humans had a disturbing habit of winning battles they should have lost, often through tactics that seemed to border on madness. Have our intelligence analysts completed their assessment of human military capabilities? He asked. Yes, Admiral. The reports are concerning. Human tactical doctrine appears to prioritize speed and unpredictability over raw firepower. They have a documented history of engaging superior forces at close range, using their smaller size to avoid return fire while targeting critical systems. Kethvar's expression darkened. Close-range engagement. That explains the Battle of Vega Prime. 3 human frigates destroyed an entire syndicate battle group by flying directly into their formation. On the bridge of the UES Defiant, Captain Jake Morrison was reviewing the tactical situation with his senior officers. The Viridian fleet looked impressive on the display, but Jake had learned long ago that appearances could be deceiving in space. Combat. Analysis, Commander Phillips, he said, turning to his strategic coordinator. Kate Phillips highlighted sections of the enemy formation on the main screen. They're using a classic defensive shell formation, Admiral, designed to provide overlapping fields of fire and prevent enemy ships from breaking through their lines. It's textbook Viridian military doctrine. Weaknesses? Jake asked. The formation assumes the enemy will engage at long range, where Viridian heavy weapons have the advantage. The ships are spaced too far apart to provide mutual support if an enemy force gets inside their formation. Also, their heavy cruisers have limited maneuverability due to their size. Dr. Ben Carter looked up from his science station. Captain, I've been analyzing the Viridian ship designs. Their weapons systems are optimized for long-range engagement. At close range, their main guns can't track fast-moving targets effectively. Jake smiled. So they're expecting us to play by their rules, stand off at long range and trade shots until one side gives up. That would be the logical approach, Phillips agreed. Any conventional military force would attempt to engage at maximum range to minimize casualties. Good thing we're not conventional, Jake replied. Amy Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system from the Ranger. Jake, I've been studying their formation. If we approach from the standard attack vector, we'll be caught in a crossfire from at least 6 ships. Not good odds. What about non-standard vectors? Jake asked. That's where it gets interesting. Their formation has a blind spot directly underneath. If we approach from below the planetary plane, we could get close before they can bring their main guns to bear. Captain Lisa Bennett, commanding the Vanguard, had been listening to the tactical discussion. The approach Amy suggests would require us to fly through the planet's radiation belt. Most species would consider that too dangerous. Most species aren't human, Jake replied. Can our ships handle the radiation? Chief Engineer Matt Thompson's voice came from the engine room. The hulls can take it for a short time. We'll need to boost power to the shields and run the radiation scrubbers at maximum, but it's doable. Admiral Kethvar received the tactical update with growing concern. The human ships had altered course, moving toward an approach vector that would take them through Kepler 442b's dangerous radiation belt. No sane military commander would risk exposing their ships to that kind of punishment. Sir, Commander Nethral reported, the humans are entering the radiation field. Their ships will suffer significant damage if they maintain this course. Unless they know something we don't, Kethvar muttered. Redirect sensors to monitor their progress. I want to know the moment they change course. The minutes ticked by, but the human ships continued their dangerous approach. Kethvar found himself grudgingly impressed by their determination, even as he prepared to destroy them. Weapons range in 20 minutes, his tactical officer announced. Shall I begin charging the main batteries? Not yet. Let them come closer. I want to end this quickly. On the Defiant, the radiation alarms were screaming as the ship pushed through the planet's radiation belt. The hull groaned under the punishment, but the shields held. Dr. Carter monitored the radiation levels while the crew worked to keep the ship operational. Hull integrity holding at 87%, Thompson reported. But we can't stay in this field much longer. We won't need to, Jake replied. How much longer until we clear the belt? 3 minutes, Captain. We'll emerge directly beneath the Viridian Formation. Jake opened a channel to the other ships. This is Defiant. Prepare for combat emergence. Remember, speed is life. Once we clear the radiation belt, we go to maximum acceleration and get inside their formation before they can react. Amy's voice came back immediately. Ranger ready. All weapon systems charged and targeting computers online. Vanguard standing by. Bennett added, We'll follow your lead, Jake. The 3 human ships burst from the radiation belt like angry hornets, their engines blazing as they accelerated toward the Viridian fleet. The enemy ships, caught completely off guard by the unexpected approach, struggled to bring their weapons to bear. All ships, execute maneuver Delta 7, Jake commanded. Amy, take the left flank. Lisa, you've got the right. I'll take the center. The human ships scattered as they approached the Viridian Formation, each following a different attack vector. The enemy commanders, trained in conventional tactics, found themselves facing a completely unpredictable assault. Admiral Kethvar watched in horror as the 3 tiny human ships dove into his carefully arranged formation. All ships open fire. Destroy those vessels before they can reach us. But the Viridian heavy cruisers were designed for long-range combat. Their massive weapons couldn't track the fast-moving human ships as they wove between the larger vessels. The few shots that connected were absorbed by the human ships' shields or deflected by their armored hulls. This is impossible, Netherall shouted. They're inside our formation. Our main guns can't target them. The Defiant screamed past the Stellar Dominion's hull, close enough that Jake could see the surprised faces of Viridian crew members through the viewports. The human ship's weapons opened fire, targeting the connection points between the Dreadnought's weapon arrays and its hull. Direct hit on their port weapons cluster, reported Lieutenant Sarah Walsh, the Defiant's weapons officer. They're losing primary firepower on that side. The Ranger, under Amy's expert piloting, danced between 2 Viridian cruisers using their bulk to shield herself from the other ship's fire. Her weapons targeted the enemy ship's sensor arrays, blinding them and creating confusion in their ranks. Meanwhile, the Vanguard had positioned itself beneath one of the heavy cruisers, firing upward into the ship's less protected underside. Bennett's precise shots found weak points in the armor, causing internal explosions that sent the massive vessel spinning out of control. Status report, Kethvar demanded, his voice tight with frustration. 3 ships damaged, sir. The humans are using tactics we've never encountered. They're treating this like a knife fight instead of a proper space battle. Kethvar stared at the tactical display, watching his perfectly organized formation dissolve into chaos as the 3 human ships continued their impossible attack. In less than 10 minutes, they had turned a hopeless situation into a tactical nightmare for the Viridians. Signal the fleet, he ordered. All ships abandon formation, engage the humans at close range. If they want to fight like madmen, we'll accommodate them. But even as he gave the order, Kethvar knew he had already lost the initiative. The humans had done exactly what the intelligence reports had warned about. They had turned a conventional battle into something completely unpredictable, and now his superior numbers meant nothing. The battle for Kepler 442b was just beginning, but the humans had already proven once again why the galaxy considered them the most dangerous species in known space. The space around Kepler 442b erupted into chaos as Admiral Kethvar's fleet abandoned their careful formation and moved to engage the human ships at close range. What had started as an organized defensive pattern quickly became a deadly free-for-all, with massive Viridian cruisers trying to corner the smaller, faster human vessels. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his command chair as the Defiant rolled hard to port, avoiding a plasma blast that would have vaporized half his ship. The Viridian heavy cruiser Dominator had broken from the main group and was pursuing him through the asteroid field that orbited the contested planet. Distance to target? Jake called out, not taking his eyes off the tactical display. 200 meters and closing, replied Lieutenant Sarah Walsh from the weapons station. But sir, we're flying directly into their firing arc. This is suicide. Jake smiled grimly. Only if you think like a Viridian. Execute attack pattern Omega-3. Sarah's fingers flew over her controls even though every instinct told her this was madness. The Defiant suddenly accelerated directly toward the massive enemy ship, closing the distance so quickly that the Viridian gunners couldn't adjust their aim fast enough. At the last possible second, Jake ordered a sharp turn that brought his ship alongside the Dominator's hull. The human vessel was so close that the enemy's defensive weapons couldn't target them without hitting their own ship. Fire at will, Jake commanded. The Defiant's weapons opened up at point-blank range, tearing into the Viridian ship's armor plating. Explosions rippled along the enemy vessel's hull as the human weapons found critical systems and fuel lines. On the bridge of the Dominator, Captain Vexthor watched in horror as his massive ship was torn apart by a vessel 1/10 its size. "How are they doing this?" he shouted at his tactical officer. "Sir, they're using our own size against us. Our weapons can't track them at this range, and our defensive systems are designed to stop attacks from a distance, not from ships flying alongside our hull." Meanwhile, the Ranger was engaged in its own desperate battle with 2 Viridian cruisers. Amy Rodriguez had taken her ship into the planet's upper atmosphere, using the dense gases to mask her movements from enemy sensors. "Amy, what's your status?" Jake's voice crackled over the communication system. "Playing hide-and-seek," she replied, pulling the Ranger into a sharp climb that brought her out of the atmosphere directly behind one of the pursuing ships. These guys really don't like surprises. The Ranger's weapons struck the Viridian cruiser's engine section, causing a cascade failure that left the massive ship drifting helplessly. The second enemy vessel tried to follow Amy back into the atmosphere, but the dense gases interfered with its navigation systems. "They're not built for atmospheric combat," Amy reported. "Their ships are too big and clumsy to maneuver in heavy atmosphere." Captain Lisa Bennett had taken the Vanguard on a different approach entirely. Her ship was weaving through the debris field left by previous mining operations, using the metal chunks and asteroid fragments as cover. "Captain," called out her tactical officer, Lieutenant Paul Davis, "3 enemy ships are converging on our position. We're about to be surrounded." Bennett studied the tactical display with calm precision. The Viridian ships were approaching from 3 different vectors, confident that they had trapped the human vessel. What they didn't realize was that Bennett had deliberately led them into this position. "Paul, do you see that large asteroid at bearing 27 Mark IV? "Yes, Captain, it's approximately 2 kilometers in diameter, mostly iron ore composition." "Perfect. Target it with our mining charges." Paul looked confused. "Ma'am, we don't have mining charges. This is a military vessel." Bennett smiled. "We do now. Reconfigure our torpedo warheads for maximum fragmentation and minimal penetration. We're going to turn that asteroid into the galaxy's biggest shotgun." The Vanguard fired 3 modified torpedoes at the massive asteroid. The explosions shattered the rock into thousands of high-velocity fragments that spread out in a cone-shaped pattern. The approaching Viridian ships flew directly into this metallic storm. The enemy vessel's shields, designed to stop energy weapons and solid projectiles, were overwhelmed by the sheer number of impacts. Hull breaches appeared all along their sides, as chunks of iron ore punched through their armor like bullets through paper. 2 enemy ships disabled, Paul reported with amazement. The third is retreating with heavy damage. "That's the problem with conventional thinking," Bennett replied. "They see an asteroid field as an obstacle. We see it as ammunition." Back on the Stellar Dominion, Admiral Kethvar was receiving damage reports from across his fleet. In less than 30 minutes, the humans had disabled or destroyed 6 of his 12 ships using tactics that defied every principle of space warfare. "Sir," Commander Netherall reported, his voice shaking with disbelief, "the humans are using our own environment against us. They're turning asteroids into weapons using planetary atmospheres for cover, and engaging at ranges where our superior firepower means nothing." Kethvar stared at the tactical display, watching his carefully planned battle dissolve into complete chaos. They're not fighting a space battle, he realized. They're fighting like pirates, or guerrilla fighters. They've thrown out every rule of civilized warfare. Dr. Ben Carter, monitoring the battle from the Defiance Science Station, was fascinated by the tactical implications of what he was witnessing. "Captain, I'm recording unprecedented tactical innovations. The Viridians are completely unprepared for this type of engagement." "That's because no sane species would attempt what we're doing," Jake replied, dodging another plasma blast. "We're not just out fighting them. We're outthinking them." The human advantage wasn't just in their ships or weapons, it was in their willingness to break every established rule of space combat. While other species had developed rigid doctrines based on centuries of experience, humans approached each battle as a unique puzzle that required creative solutions. Lieutenant Sarah Walsh had been analyzing the Viridian weapon systems during the battle. "Captain, I've identified a critical weakness in their plasma cannons. The targeting systems have a 3-second delay between target acquisition and firing. If we can exploit that timing gap—" "Do it," Jake ordered without hesitation. The Defiant began a series of rapid course changes, each maneuver timed to coincide with the enemy's targeting cycle. The Viridian gunners found themselves always firing at where the human ship had been, never where it was going to be. Amy Rodriguez had discovered a similar vulnerability in the enemy's defensive systems. "Jake, their point defense systems are designed to track incoming missiles, not ships. If we approach at missile velocity and trajectory—" "Try it," Jake replied. The Ranger suddenly accelerated to maximum speed and approached one of the Viridian cruisers in a straight line, mimicking the flight path of a guided missile. The enemy's automated defenses began firing anti-missile rounds instead of switching to anti-ship weapons. By the time the Viridian crew realized their mistake, the Ranger was already past their defensive perimeter and striking their ship's command section with surgical precision. The battle had become a masterclass in adaptive tactics. Every time the Viridians thought they understood the human strategy, the humans changed their approach completely. It was warfare as performance art, with each human ship improvising deadly variations on themes that no military academy had ever taught. Commander Kate Phillips, coordinating the fleet's movements from the Defiant, was amazed at how quickly her fellow humans adapted to each new challenge. "Captain, we're not just winning this battle. We're rewriting the rules of space combat in real time." "That's what humans do," Jake replied, watching as another Viridian ship limped away from the battle zone. "We don't accept that any situation is impossible. We just find a way to make it possible." Admiral Kethavar finally understood what he was facing. These weren't just enemy ships attacking his fleet. This was a completely different philosophy of warfare, one that treated every disadvantage as a potential advantage, and every obstacle as a tool to be used. "Signal all remaining ships," he ordered. "Retreat to minimum safe distance. We need to reassess our approach." But even as his ships began to withdraw, Kethvar knew the damage was already done. The humans had proven once again that conventional military thinking was useless when facing an opponent who refused to follow conventional rules. The battle for Kepler 442b was far from over, but the galaxy had just witnessed another demonstration of why humans were considered the most unpredictable and dangerous species in known space. The Defiant shuddered as another plasma blast grazed its hull, sending sparks flying across the bridge. Captain Jake Morrison felt the deck plates vibrate under his feet as Chief Engineer Matt Thompson's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. "Captain, we've got problems down here. That last hit took out our primary power coupling. I'm running on backup systems, but they won't hold much longer." Jake studied the tactical display with growing concern. The battle had been raging for over an hour, and while the humans had inflicted devastating damage on the Viridian fleet, their own ships were paying the price. The Defiant's hull was scarred with weapon impacts, and several sections were venting atmosphere into space. "Status on Ranger and Vanguard?" he asked Commander Kate Phillips. "Amy's lost her main engine, but she's still maneuvering on thrusters. Lisa's ship has multiple hull breaches, but her crew is keeping her in the fight." The human fleet had accomplished the impossible, reducing the Viridian force from 12 ships to just 4 still capable of combat. But the cost had been enormous. All 3 human vessels were severely damaged, and their crews were exhausted from the prolonged engagement. Admiral Kethvar watched from the bridge of his flagship as the remaining Viridian ships regrouped around the stellar dominion. His massive dreadnought had taken a beating from the human attacks, but it was still the most powerful vessel in the system. "Sir," Commander Netherall reported, consulting his damage control displays, "we've lost 8 ships completely. 3 more are too damaged to continue fighting. The humans have crippled our entire fleet with just 3 small vessels." Kethvar's expression was a mixture of rage and grudging respect. "How many crew members have we lost?" "Preliminary reports indicate over 3,000 dead or wounded across the fleet, sir. The humans targeted our weapons and engines with surgical precision, but they've also been rescuing our survivors from the damaged ships." This last piece of information troubled Kethvar more than the military defeat. Even in the heat of battle, the humans had been launching rescue pods to save Viridian crew members whose ships had been destroyed. It was an act of mercy that no other species would have shown during such a fierce engagement. On the bridge of the Ranger, Amy Rodriguez was struggling to keep her ship operational. The main engine was completely destroyed, and she was relying on maneuvering thrusters to stay in the fight. Her weapon systems were still functional, but ammunition was running low. "Jake, I'm running on fumes over here," she reported over the communication channel. "My ship's barely holding together, but I've got enough firepower left for one more good shot." "Save it for when we need it most," Jake replied. "Lisa, what's your status?" Captain Lisa Bennett's voice was strained as she responded from the Vanguard. "We've got hull breaches on decks 3 through 7, but my crew has sealed the worst of them. Engineering reports that our reactor is stable, and we still have full weapons capability." Dr. Ben Carter had been monitoring the battle from his science station, analyzing the tactical data and calculating probability matrices. What he discovered made him call out to Captain Morrison with urgent excitement. "Captain, I've been studying the Viridian fleet formation. They're positioning themselves for a final assault, but there's something interesting about their approach pattern." Jake moved to Carter's station, studying the complex tactical display. "What am I looking at, Doctor?" "They're clustering their remaining ships around their flagship for mutual protection. It's a sound defensive strategy, but it creates a vulnerability. If we could disable their command ship, the entire formation would lose coordination." "The Kure stellar dominion is twice the size of all our ships combined," Jake pointed out. "How do we take down something that massive?" Carter smiled, his eyes lighting up with the kind of dangerous inspiration that had made humans famous throughout the galaxy. "By using their own tactics against them. What if we don't try to destroy it? What if we just make it impossible for them to coordinate their attack?" Meanwhile, Commander Phillips had been coordinating with the other human ships, developing a strategy that would have seemed insane to any conventional military commander. "Jake, I've got an idea, but it's going to require precise timing and a lot of luck." "At this point, luck is all we have left," Jake replied. "What do you have in mind?" "The Viridian ships are using their flagship as a communication hub. All their tactical data flows through the Stellar Dominion's command center. If we could disrupt that flow of information..." Jake understood immediately. "We turn their strength into a weakness, cut off the head, and the body can't function." The plan that emerged from the Human Tactical Conference would have been rejected by any sane military strategist. It involved using the 3 damaged human ships as a coordinated strike force against the most heavily defended target in the system. Amy Rodriguez listened to the plan with growing amazement. "So let me understand this correctly. We're going to fly our 3 barely functional ships directly at their flagship, which is surrounded by protective escorts and armed with enough firepower to destroy a small planet." "That's the general idea," Jake confirmed. "The key is timing. We hit them from 3 different angles simultaneously, focusing on their communication arrays instead of trying to destroy the ship itself." "And what happens after we disable their communications?" Lisa Bennett asked from the Vanguard. "Then we offer them terms for surrender," Jake replied. "Without coordination, their remaining ships will be sitting ducks. Kethvar will have to choose between watching his fleet get picked apart piece by piece or accepting a negotiated settlement." The human ships began their final approach, moving in a complex pattern that would bring them to the Viridian formation from multiple vectors. Each vessel was barely operational, held together by the skill of their engineering crews and the determination of their commanders. Admiral Kethvar watched, the approaching human ships with a mixture of disbelief and growing dread. "They're attacking again. 3 damaged ships against our entire remaining fleet, and they're still coming." "Sir, their approach pattern suggests they're targeting our command and control systems," his tactical officer reported. "If they succeed in disrupting our communications, then we lose the ability to coordinate our defense," Kethvar finished. "These humans think like hunters, not soldiers. They're going for the killing blow." The final phase of the battle began with the Defiant making a high-speed run at the Stellar Dominion's forward communication array. Jake's ship took devastating fire from multiple Viridian vessels, but its armored hull held long enough to deliver a precise strike that severed the flagship's primary communication links. Simultaneously, the Ranger, despite its damaged engines, managed to approach from below and destroy the secondary communication array with its remaining weapons. Amy's ship took critical damage in the process, but the mission was accomplished. The Vanguard completed the coordinated attack by targeting the backup communication systems, effectively cutting the Viridian flagship off from its escort vessels. Lisa Bennett's precise shots left the Stellar Dominion functioning, but unable to coordinate the actions of the other ships. "Communication systems are down across the fleet," Commander Nethral reported to Admiral Kethvar. "We can't coordinate our attacks or share tactical information." Kethvar stared at the tactical display, watching as his remaining ships began to drift apart without central coordination. The humans had done it again, finding a way to neutralize a superior force through tactics that no other species would have attempted. Jake Morrison's voice came over the emergency communication channel, broadcasted to all ships in the system. "Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Morrison. Your fleet is disabled and your communication systems are down. We're prepared to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this conflict." For a long moment, the space around Kepler 442b was silent, except for the hum of damaged engines and the crackle of energy discharges from wounded ships. Then Admiral Kethvar activated his emergency transmitter. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Kethvar. I believe it's time we had that conversation about negotiations. The battle for Kepler 442b was over, but the legend of human tactical innovation had grown even larger. 3 damaged ships had defeated an entire fleet, not through superior firepower, but through the kind of creative thinking that made humans the most feared and respected species in the galaxy. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the Galactic Council chamber hummed with a different kind of energy. The same delegates who had watched the human fleet approach with nervous dread now sat in respectful silence as Captain Jake Morrison, newly promoted to Admiral, prepared to address the assembly. The battle had become legend throughout the galaxy, discussed in military academies and diplomatic circles alike. 3 human ships had defeated 12 Viridian vessels through tactics so unconventional that most species were still trying to understand how it had been possible. Ambassador Zexhai of the Viridian Empire stood to address the assembly first. His blue scales had lost some of their luster in the months since the defeat, but his voice carried a new note of respect. "Honored delegates, I stand before you today to formally acknowledge what our military experts have concluded after extensive analysis of the Kepler 442b engagement. The human species possesses a form of tactical thinking that defies our conventional understanding of warfare." The chamber remained silent as Zexhai continued. "We have studied every aspect of the battle, from the initial approach through the planet's radiation belt to the final coordinated strike on our command systems. Our conclusion is that humans operate under what we can only describe as calculated madness." Senator Throlix of the Centauri Federation leaned forward in his chair. "Ambassador Zexhai, could you elaborate on this assessment? Our own military analysts are struggling to understand how such a small force achieved victory." Zexhai activated a holographic display that showed the battle from multiple angles. The humans did not simply fight bravely or use superior technology. They fundamentally changed the nature of the engagement. Where we saw a space battle with established rules and tactics, they saw a 3-dimensional puzzle with unlimited solutions. The display showed the moment when the human ships emerged from the radiation belt. No other species in our records has ever used environmental hazards as tactical advantages. The humans flew through radiation that should have disabled their ships, turning what we considered an obstacle into a strategic asset. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in the designated human section of the chamber, listening to the analysis with quiet satisfaction. Beside him sat his former crew members, now all promoted for their actions during the battle. Amy Rodriguez had been given command of the new UES Ranger 2, while Lisa Bennett had been appointed as the head of Human Tactical Development. Dr. Ben Carter, now the galaxy's leading expert on human military psychology, had spent the past 6 months traveling to different worlds, giving lectures on what he called adaptive tactical thinking. His research had become required reading at military academies across known space. Commander Kate Phillips had been promoted to strategic coordinator for the entire human fleet, tasked with developing new training programs based on the lessons learned at Kepler 442b. Her work was already showing results, with human crews becoming even more unpredictable in their tactical approaches. Representative Quindar of the Silicon Confederacy activated his translation unit. The implications of human tactical capabilities extend beyond military considerations. If humans can find creative solutions to seemingly impossible combat situations, what might they accomplish in other fields? This question had been troubling the galactic community for months. Human engineers were already proposing construction projects that other species considered impossible. Human scientists were developing theories that challenged established understanding of physics and biology. The transformation of Kepler 442b itself served as an example. After the battle, humans and Viridians had worked together to establish a joint mining and research colony. The human approach to resource extraction was so efficient that productivity had increased by 300%, while actually reducing environmental impact. Ambassador Veltar of the Andromedan Republic stood to address the assembly. The psychological profiles we have developed suggest that humans possess a unique combination of traits. They display exceptional adaptability under pressure, willingness to accept calculated risks, and most importantly, the ability to see opportunities where other species see only obstacles. Jake Morrison was invited to speak, and he approached the central podium with the quiet confidence that had carried him through the battle. The chamber fell silent as he began to address the assembled delegates. Honorable representatives, I want to thank you for the opportunity to join this council and participate in galactic affairs. The battle at Kepler 442b was not fought because humans enjoy conflict, but because we believe in finding solutions to problems that others might consider unsolvable. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of delegates from 12 different species. What you call calculated madness, we simply call thinking outside the box. Every species here has its own strengths and perspectives. Humans happen to specialize in looking at familiar problems from unfamiliar angles. Senator Thralix raised one of his insect-like appendages. Admiral Morrison, our military experts are concerned about the implications of human tactical unpredictability. How can we establish stable defensive alliances if human methods cannot be predicted or replicated? Jake smiled. Senator, that's exactly the wrong way to think about it. You don't need to predict our methods or replicate our tactics. You need to understand that every challenge requires a different approach. What worked at Kepler 442b might be completely useless in the next situation we face. Dr. Carter had been studying this phenomenon intensively. His research showed that human tactical success came not from any single method or strategy, but from a fundamental willingness to abandon preconceived notions and adapt to changing circumstances. The key insight, Carter explained to the assembly, is that humans don't rely on doctrine or established procedures when facing unknown situations. Instead, we treat each new challenge as a unique puzzle that requires creative problem-solving. This concept was revolutionary to most galactic species, who had developed their military and scientific knowledge over thousands of years of careful study and gradual refinement. The idea of deliberately abandoning proven methods in favor of untested approaches seemed reckless to most alien minds. Ambassador Zexhai had spent considerable time studying human psychology since the battle. What we have learned is that humans possess an unusual tolerance for uncertainty and risk. Where other species seek stability and predictability, humans seem to thrive in chaotic situations. The formal induction ceremony began with Admiral Morrison taking the oath that made Earth the 13th member of the Galactic Council. The significance of the moment was not lost on anyone present. Humanity was being welcomed not just as another member species, but as a catalyst for change in galactic thinking. "We are not the strongest species," Jake said during his formal address, "nor are we the smartest or the most technologically advanced. But we refuse to accept that any problem is unsolvable or any odds are truly impossible." That perspective, combined with the wisdom and experience of our new galactic partners, opens up possibilities that none of us could achieve alone. The months following humanity's induction into the Galactic Council brought rapid changes across known space. Human engineers working with Viridian architects designed space stations that were both more efficient and more beautiful than anything previously imagined. Human scientists collaborating with Centauri researchers made breakthroughs in faster-than-light communication that had eluded galactic science for centuries. The key breakthrough came when humans suggested abandoning the traditional approach entirely and trying methods that conventional theory said were impossible. Dr. Carter's research into human tactical psychology had been adapted for use in civilian applications. Educational institutions across the galaxy were beginning to incorporate human-style problem-solving into their curricula, teaching students to question assumptions and explore unconventional solutions. The transformation was not without challenges. Some species struggled to adapt to the unpredictability that humans brought to galactic affairs. Traditional diplomatic protocols had to be revised to account for humanity's tendency to propose solutions that seemed impossible at first glance. But the results spoke for themselves. Conflicts that had simmered for decades were resolved through human-mediated negotiations that found creative compromises. Scientific problems that had puzzled researchers for generations yielded to fresh approaches inspired by human thinking. As Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the New Earth Embassy, watching construction crews from 6 different species working together on an impossible engineering project, he reflected on how much had changed since that desperate approach to Kepler 442b. Amy Rodriguez joined him at the viewport, now commanding her own ship and preparing for humanity's first deep space exploration mission beyond the established galactic boundaries. "They still think we're crazy, you know," she said with a grin. Jake nodded, watching as human and alien engineers solved another supposedly impossible technical challenge. "Good. The day they stop thinking that is the day we stop being useful." The galaxy had learned to embrace what humans brought to the cosmic community. The radical idea that impossible was just another word for a problem that hadn't been solved yet.